All right, I think we can get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our July rendition of Show and Tell. I'm Jenna Garasio, the head of content and innovation here at Future Snoops, and welcome, and I'm excited to have you all here. So, whether this is your first time joining or you've been with us for a while, Show and Tell is our way of sharing what's catching our attention across culture and design. It's always been about opening up our process, so showing you what we're seeing, what's sparking curiosity, and how we're connecting the dots as a team. That said, we've recently been reflecting on how show and tell has evolved over the years. Originally, it was something we did internally and in person as a way to get the team together and share what's catching our eye. It was definitely much more casual, kind of off the cuff, and above all, it gave us a chance to learn from each other in real time. Over the years, as we've opened it up to the public, it's evolved into something a bit more polished and more presentation heavy. And while that's definitely had value, we've realized we wanted to bring some of that original energy back. So, starting today, we're shifting the format a bit. You can still expect inspiring signals and thought-provoking conversation, but instead of a series of multiple individual shares, we're now going to be centering each session around one big topic or cultural idea. The goal here is really to open up space for discussion, both inside our team and with all of you. So this means that we also want to hear from you in the chat during the webinar. So to start, for those of you who haven't done so already, please let us know where you're logging in from. It's always great to see kind of across the world where everyone is coming in. And then please do take advantage of the chat box throughout the webinar and let us know what's resonating or if you have any questions on the subject, and we're going to try to answer them in real time. We want this to be as collaborative and involved as possible. So before we dive in and before I share the topic that we'll be getting into today, I'm going to quickly turn it over to Robbie, our VP of Fashion, to share a bit about a new report series we recently launched. Hi, Robbie.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited about this one because it's got like an element of the unknown about it with our discussion. Um, so some of you may have joined our webinar yesterday, and some of you maybe are hearing about it for the first time. But yesterday we did a webinar called Gen Z Reintroduced, which was a walkthrough of a four-part series report that we just finished, and is available for you to enjoy if you are a Future Snoops client. You can have a look through those reports on the website now. You can see on the screen it's broken up into four sections. So we were calling them factions. And if you are not a client, I would keep an eye on your email over the next few days so we can send the recording out so you can rewatch or watch for the first time at your leisure. So just a bit about the reports. These kind of reports were built to help you reconnect with your Gen Z consumer, and it came from months of research where we analyzed Gen Z behaviors and the cultural shifts that are affecting them. And I think it's fair to say that this kind of Gen Z one size fits all age-based demographic strategy has failed. Um, this is where I get a bit nerdy and start talking about facts. So there are over 1.8 billion Gen Zers globally, and they only share around 10% of the same likes, wants, dislikes, and shopping habits. Yet many of us have been building marketing and selling strategies on this tiny fraction of a number, while the other 90% is wildly varied. So in these reports, we really dig into that. We help you reconnect with your consumer and kind of reintroduce you to Gen Z. So if you would like to learn more, you can either watch the webinar or you can dig into the reports if you're a client. So keep an eye on your emails, and I hope you enjoy them as much as we loved working on them. Thank you so much.
Robbie. It was one of my favorite webinars of the year, so I highly recommend taking a look and watching the recording if you weren't able to catch the webinar. I would also say that even if your target market is not Gen Z, there's a lot of insight, I think, just in general of how us as consumers and us as people are shifting in terms of our needs and priorities. So a lot of interesting things to think about. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute as we briefly just start to talk a little bit about today's topic of conversation, which is authenticity. So, this is a concept that's been in the cultural conversation for years, but one that we feel is evolving right under our feet. We still use this word like we know what it means. So, being real, being honest, or true to yourself. But in 2025, what does that really even mean anymore? What counts as real? And does it even matter? In a world of AI generated faces, filtered identities, body modification wrapped in wellness language, and social feeds built on both vulnerability and performance, authenticity definitely hasn't disappeared, but its meaning matrix is changing. This is what we want to unpack, but before we do that, we want to do a quick poll to get a read on where everyone in the audience currently stands. So, how are you feeling about authenticity and culture right now? So we want to do this quick poll. You should see a poll popping up on your screen in a moment. And while you might agree with multiple solutions or multiple answers, just choose the statement you most identify with. So we'll give everyone a quick minute to answer. And also just to mention that this poll is completely anonymous. Your choice will not be reflected or assigned to you, but we will be sharing the data from this poll at after our session when we send all the links as well. Like we should have like intro music or something while everyone fills it out.
I was waiting for someone to speak first. I was like, I don't want to sit in the silence.
All right. I think we can conclude that. So everyone, thank you for weighing in. We're going to share the results after today's session and also encourage you to try to stay on at the end as we'll be asking one final poll question before we wrap up. So with that, I'm going to share my screen again quickly. Give me 1 second. All right. Team, can you see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so twice a year we host something called Visionary Pitch Day. This is an internal session where our full team comes together to pitch the cultural and design forces we believe are going to shape the season ahead, something that is led by Hallie, who is currently on the webinar with us today. Last Thursday, we held our Fall Winter 27-28 Pitch Day, and authenticity was this leitmotif that kept bubbling up. And ultimately, that's kind of why, or at least part of the reason why we chose it as today's focus. Because what we realized and what we kind of came together to discuss following Pitch Day is that it's not so much just a trending topic anymore, it's really morphing and showing up in ways that feel kind of subtle, sometimes contradictory, and deeply tied to how we express ourselves in culture right now. So, we pulled together this very rough, kind of raw, kind of sneak behind the curtain of some of our team's pitches. Um, so as you can see, we had myself, Patricia, who's our director of women's. We had Navarra, who's our director of culture, Hallie, our director of visionary. Layla, who's going to speak in a moment, and Amelia as well. Different versions of kind of authenticity here. So we have links that people shared during our pitch day that we'll be sharing with everyone at the end so you can kind of dig in. I'm not going to go too much into everyone's pitches. I just wanted to show this as a visualization of different ways that authenticity was bubbling up in the conversation. I also want to mention that this is like a little tiny snapshot, but for any of you that are clients, you will be getting our Early Thinkers program, which is where we take all of the pitches from pitch day, pull out kind of some of the biggest concepts, and then share with you the full deck of which is this breadth of research and inspiration that you'll all have access to. So that will be coming in a couple weeks. And we're also excited that this season with Early Thinkers, we'll also be introducing a new AI agent that you'll be able to engage with and play around with as well. So that is to come. But one pitch that really captured the complexity really beautifully came from Layla, one of our brilliant culture analysts who's on the call with us today. And her take felt especially timely and thought-provoking. So we thought it could be great to have her give a quick summary of her pitch to kind of help set the stage for our discussion. And then we'll open it up to the rest of the team to really kind of dig in and unpack kind of what we're seeing when it comes to authenticity. So with that, Layla, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jenna. I'm really excited to dive in. I already see an Addison fan in the chat, so super exciting. But basically, my pitch was born from the countless debates I've had with friends and coworkers over the last few weeks about Addison Rae's recent rebranding. And if you're not familiar with her, Addison Rae rose to fame as a popular TikTok dancer and has now fully transitioned into pop music with her debut album, Addison. And it has ignited split opinions about whether her rise to fame reflects her true spirit or if it's simply the product of having a good team and strong references. But as much as I have scrutinized her transition, the discourse only further affirmed for me how easy it has become to perform authenticity, causing me to question how it will be expressed in the future. So right now we're seeing people trying to be authentic with these subtle signifiers where many are latching on to their hobbies as a way to kind of assert themselves as individuals to onlookers and others using basic fashion to create an if you know, you know feel to kind of hint at their favorite brands. But in the end, these approaches only create an illusion of authenticity as they mostly center the opinions of others rather than focusing on expressing one's true self. But signals across music, social media, and fashion point to a potential breakthrough in sincere expression that could guide us in a world where authenticity is becoming harder to define. So in music, artists are being applauded for their authenticity when showing a sustained commitment to their perspective, with most notably Charli XCX allowing her Brat era to live on for as long as she wishes. I think now the cover is updated to like forever, something like that. So I just absolutely love that. Um, Also on social media, there's been this move toward more polished content with high quality skits taking over instead of trying to emulate this raw and unfiltered feel, allowing brands to bring audiences into their world rather than inorganically asserting themselves into the audience's universe. And then even in fashion, we're kind of seeing this exploration of hyper customizable trends like these prize-winning accessories and designs that all have this similar feel to them, but each with their own unique execution that holds a meaning specific to each wearer. So although we're still unpacking what this post-authenticity conversation will look like, I'm very optimistic that we're moving towards something that feels more genuine, even if it doesn't feel like the classic effortlessness and rawness that we've seen in the past. But really excited to hear what everyone else's takes on where you think authenticity will be going in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Layla. And again, if you're a client, Layla's pitch will be one of the ones that we'll be pulling out in Early Thinkers. Definitely encourage you to listen to the full breakdown, because I think it is just a great level setting for today's discussion. Then also just thinking about what it means to be a brand existing in culture today, as well as an individual and a consumer, and the way in which authenticity is kind of perceived and being kind of recontextualized. So, in addition to Layla, I'm joined by some brilliant minds from the team who are going to help us unpack this a bit further. We've got Hallie, our Director of Visionary, Robbie, our VP of Fashion, who you heard from earlier, Nicole, our Director of Kids, Emma, our Director of Sustainability, and Katie May, our Director of Swim and Intimates. So, to kick things off, I kind of want to ask a very kind of open-ended question of just how you all are seeing authenticity show up in your own research right now. Hallie, I know you're in the midst of kind of gathering everyone's ideas from Pitch Day and also did a lot of research of your own. I'd love to kind of kick it to you first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I feel like this topic is really exciting because a lot of the things that Layla mentioned, how it's kind of shifting and changing in meaning, I think is going to be show up in design in an interesting way. But similar kind of to Layla and kind of looking at like the Addis Ray discourse, I feel like a lot of my research going into this new season was about these kind of online or larger cultural conversations that were sparking online discourse and maybe pop culture, but also film or television. And as being a huge film fan, I was kind of kept seeing this new genre that I was not really a new genre, but I kind of coined it as a new genre, is this idea of these meta documentaries. I think it's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people watch documentaries, whether it's like these true crime ones or more factual. But I had seen a couple that I thought really experimented with the form and really made me think a lot about how we present reality and how we document stories and who becomes a reliable narrator. And I think that also translates to how we were talking about how people show up on social media, how brands show up on social media. So you'll get it in the links after we send all the links for show and tell. But two of the films that I really were inspired by were Stories We Tell by the director Sarah Polley, and then this other documentary called Four Daughters, which is a Tunisian film that you can actually watch on Netflix. And just both of those were so fascinating. And I don't want to give away what either of them are about or what they turn into ultimately, but just this idea that a documentary doesn't have to be so straightforward really made me kind of think about what an authentic telling of a story is. And I think my other kind of big key research that ended up kind of influencing my design research, but these were kind of the early sparks of it, was The Rehearsal by Nathan Fielder. So the TV show, if anyone who isn't familiar with it, the premise is basically that this comedian and actor, Nathan Fielder, he sets out to conduct these incredibly elaborate recreations of everyday scenarios that everyday people just might want to rehearse before it actually happens. So he creates exact replicas of apartments, bars, and restaurants. He hires actors to fill in for these like fake supporting characters in these very real people's lives. And then he conducts hundreds and hundreds of possible outcomes for the simulation within each scenario. So I just think it's so interesting about how like the thesis for this season, the second season in particular, sparked this internal debate about, okay, if you're actually hiring these actors, how real is it? And just kind of questioning the legitimacy of these simulations. So there's so much debate about it. I don't want to also give anything away, but again, it kind of led me thinking about how we can no longer discern if what is presented is actually real or not. So I just think that that kind of idea that's happening in other pop culture areas could be really interesting when it shows up in design and kind of how we think about product and how we think about brands, and how we interact with them going forward. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that all of that is really interesting. The fact that there is such a conversation about that in the midst also of AI as well. And I know it's something that all of us have been kind of discussing a lot internally. Emma, I know you also shared an article recently about this topic. I don't know if there's anything that you're feeling kind of from the AI perspective that you've been digging into. Um, or kind of what you're feeling from the AI perspective and authenticity.
On the AI perspective, I actually read a really interesting Substack this morning, and it was called what's it called? I can't remember it. So that's called You Sound Like ChatGPT. And this I found really fascinating because it relates quite well to my area in sustainability as well. But it basically broke down the fact that our use of AI, particularly things like ChatGPT, is quite obviously already shifting the language that we're using. And the research that was being done or has been done has shown that there's certain words that are now being used more. So I think prowess is one of them because that's really favoured by ChatGPT. And there are other words that are completely kind of like decreasing in their use. So I think one of them is like unearth and nuance. And these are words that ChatGPT doesn't particularly like or doesn't like use often. So like the words we're actually using is shifting, but also the research pinpointed that the tone in which we're speaking is completely shifting as well. And the thing that we're starting to lose is like the humanity part of how we talk and engage with each other. And it basically talks around losing those basic human signals in the way that we speak. So showing vulnerability, showing empathy, and it says something really interesting as a comparison. It's like we are now saying something like, I'm sorry you're upset, versus, I'm going to read this, like, hey, sorry I freaked at dinner. I probably shouldn't have skipped therapy this week. The latter is what you'd actually say to a friend if you are being your true, like, authentic self. And the former is kind of where we're shifting with the whole AI narrative and uptake and so on and so forth. And yeah, that really spoke to me today when I was reading through that Substack. And in the sustainability space, that the use of language is also shifting, but it's not going down that route, which I really like. We're actually shifting language in sustainability. We've kind of almost been at that, for want of a better word, robotic-y area, kind of very kind of professional, very like our scope 3 emissions, our decarbonisation strategy, our net zero approach, words that average everyone, including myself in a space, we don't necessarily relate to, we don't always understand, it doesn't really mean a lot to us. Brands that are kind of moving forward in sustainable development and really trying to shift the needle are kind of dropping that language and just speaking more human. It'll be like we're trying to reduce our pollution, like we're all experiencing extreme weather events right now. It's like actually using language that's related to our day-to-day lives versus kind of like this bigger intangible stuff that's happening, on a scale that we can't really comprehend as an individual.
Yeah. It's interesting that that juxtaposition is happening in this moment. I think that's what's interesting is there is this like real and non-real kind of like going at each other. I think it's also interesting what you're talking about with the language. I think authenticity around language or like even original thought is not in crisis, but in conversation right now. And I know that internally, like as a company and as a team, we all love to use M dashes, but now I feel like a lot of us are trying to move away from using M dashes because ChatGPT uses M dashes so much that it feels like if we're using them, then it seems like we're leveraging ChatGPT or AI to help write our things. And I think it's interesting what you said too, of like how the psychology of what it's shifting, of like what happens when our language is changing and influence there, and how that changes the psychology and the way that we think about either ourselves or the world around us.
And I think relate to each other.
Totally.
Already much more isolated than we ever were because of tech, like making everything much more convenient. And if our language shifts, so we're not talking to each other like we used to, that just reduces our ability to connect even more.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that lack of connection is kind of interesting to some of the things you were talking about yesterday, Robbie, in your webinar with Gen Z.
I'm so glad you came to me because I was just thinking, like, I wonder what, based on what you were just saying, I wonder what that will mean for like the future of like regional accents. So I'm from Liverpool and we have a lot of slang words that are passed down from generation to generation. And Liverpool even has its own dictionary, which is incredible. And we kind of speak in slang with each other and it's super fast paced. But I wonder if like we're in this AIification of language. Did I just make a slang word up? But like, I think that is so fascinating. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Um, I feel like for Gen Z or like the younger kind of person, I think there is a few different kind of wants and needs or expressions of authenticity. I think one is if like when does authenticity become performative? So we've seen things like Be Real, or we'll be like, you know, that kind of Instagram where you're like looking at nothing and you're kind of doing that like, oh, you caught me by surprise look that we see. It's kind of like, you know, that that's not authentic and it's performative, but it's almost like artistic expression. And is today's authenticity based on these kind of like captured moments that you've set up probably for an hour? And is that like the new version of like what we would see in like Renaissance paintings, or like heightened elements of reality, or like David LaChapelle or like Pierre Gilles, their amazing photography that's kind of, you know, it's real, but then it's been doctored. And I'm wondering if there's like we are so desperate for authenticity, but then we like see somebody do something that we think is authentic, and we're like, oh, I want to be authentic like this, but it's performed. I don't know. It's insane. And I feel like every time something authentic happens, I feel like it will be authentic for 5 minutes and then it will go and it'll be performative. I don't know.
Well, I also think that this idea of like something being authentic for 3 seconds is really true because the access to everything is so heightened these days that someone comes up with something original and then someone is copying it, then copying it, then copying it. So within like a second, something that feels very interesting and new suddenly feels like dead or copied of a copy of a copy. So I do think that that is also interesting of like, what defines authenticity when things are constantly being like replicated from one to the other?
Yeah. I think there's separate things. I feel like there's authenticity in that sense, in like an artistic sense, but then I think there's which is kind of blurred and it kind of doesn't matter because it's art, and like what is art now? It's kind of whoever creates it. And I think that then there's this other side of authenticity which is very serious, where Gen Z want brands to be authentic and transparent and lean into the fight and stand for the things that Gen Zers and humans believe in terms of equality and inclusion and all of those like amazing DEI moments that we want to happen and continue. And I think there's like a demand for authenticity in that way because it affects our human rights and it affects how we receive news. And I think one thing that Gen Z struggles with the most is the difference between, we spoke about this yesterday, but the difference between news and the news. And because people who are putting out information only have a few seconds to grab your attention. So they're opting for shock tactics and they're opting for, like, I don't know, I'll see things on Instagram and it will say, for example, I live in Barcelona, it will say tourists are getting pelted with water guns by locals and there's protests and it's on my street and I look out and I'm like, this is old, like this isn't real. But it's sold to me to terrify me so I won't go. And there's a problem around authenticity in that way. But then the artistic side, I feel like it's like fun and fear. I don't know.
And
Yeah.
where is truth necessary and where is it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you phrased it that way. It kind of brings me back to the Addison thing. I know I sound like I'm obsessed, but I almost feel like the authenticity element with that is like you enjoy the performance, but there's something nice to have about the transparency behind like knowing who her team is, knowing who her references are. So maybe that's another kind of point of reference for where we're headed. Like maybe it matters more where it's coming from than the actual execution and being real about that.
Yeah.
You can even like you can even tie that with Charlie because she sings with autotune and she makes everybody knows she sings with autotune. Even if she speaks to something, I saw a performance and something went wrong and they played the wrong version. And it was like, we played the wrong like the autotune on her mic when she was talking, but she doesn't hide it. And that is not authentic, or is it? Because she's being authentic with it. So what is the difference between Charlie, who everybody's obsessed with, like, and Addison Rae? I don't know. Just an interesting question.
Yeah. Nicole, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of like Robbie and the Gen Z, like much of what we do in kids is looking at Gen Alpha. So it's really interesting because the oldest Gen Alpha is 14 and the last Gen Alpha is being born like this year. So you have like the older Gen Alphas that are 14, most of them are on social media, they have their phones, and you see them being influenced by everything that we are, but it's especially detrimental because it's such a, developmental time for them. And so then you see among the younger Gen Alphas, so those ones that are offline, they are kind of, with kids, especially young kids, you don't get more authentic. They really are living in the moment, they're present, they feel what they feel. I see it with my 5-year-old. If he hates something, he will tell me and he'll tell everyone. Like they can't hide their truth. And so I really think that part of like authenticity is almost kind of relearning the things that we knew when we were really young and we've kind of learned to ignore because of society, because of technology and all that. So I think it's just going to be even more and more interesting to see like Gen Alphas as they evolve, because right now there's definitely the divide between the tweens and teens that are going into the, more of the youth territory and the younger kids, and seeing how things change for them.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think it's also, there's so much, as you said, unlearning to be done. And I think we also, for those, it'll be interesting to see these younger generations who are coming into a space where what is real and what is not real, you have to question all the time, versus for so many of us, that certain things have been real our whole lives. Then when it's suddenly not real, a lot of people still assume it is. And so I feel like there's a lot more of kind of that backwards motion that a lot of us have to do, where I think there could be a lot of good learnings from the younger generations. Katie, I know yesterday we had a catch up and we were talking a little bit about swim and intimates. I think that there's a lot of interesting things going on around your area of expertise as well.
I'm really cynical about it for my area about authenticity because, and this was part of Patricia, our women's wear director, it's part of her pitch as well. And basically from like 2010 to 2020, all the brands had this huge body positivity movement, right? Every brand you can think of were like, oh God, quick, we've got to get this, curve or plus size collection in, go, model needs to, we have to cover this. And then all of a sudden it's completely disappeared, even on the runway as well, where we can see like the decline in like plus size models, and it's statistically declining every year now. And so I just think it's all shifting, and I think mainly there's a lot of things, and there was a report that I wrote on site about this, but I think there's a lot to do with Ozempic. And me and Emma were actually chatting about this yesterday, and you had a really good point, because Emma was saying basically, well, it kind of shows that it was never really genuine in the first place, because it's just another trend aimed at this untapped market to sell more goods. So I am a bit cynical about it for me, and it's really depressing, a little bit actually, because I think that there is such an untapped market there, but now because of this trend, like thin is in, it's just shifted back. So yeah, it's sorry to be a bit down.
No,
But yeah, I think sorry, go on, Helen.
I was going to pop on to agree, because I feel like all the conversations that were happening around that, but also here in the US specifically, when they were rolling back all of these DEI initiatives, and kind of talking about like, oh, like, why do you think that these people are rolling it back? And my also kind of cynical take was that I don't think that a lot of these brands actually believed in it in the first place. I think that a lot of them were just following what they thought they should do, but it wasn't authentic to their brands. When it was time, when it wasn't actually like something that they could highlight anymore, they almost decided like, actually, let's reel it back in because XYZ reason. So I think I agree with you there. And also, yeah, with the plus size, the DEI, kind of any of these topics that become trends and they're outside of their actual authentic beliefs. So
the same completely has happened with like sustainability commitments and goals. What we've all heard of almost every major brand being like, oh, we said we'd have a goal that we'd hit by 2030. We're now just going to pop that back to 2050 because we're not going to be able to make it. We've got other priorities. And a lot of them came out so used to specialize in plastic and not plastic, plastic free. And so many brands made these massive plastic commitments after Blue Planet 2 came out, like a number of years ago, pre-COVID. Because it was such a heightened area of interest for consumers. Everyone was like, I can't believe that how much plastic there is in our ocean. I can't, everyone suddenly had this information and knowledge that we didn't really have in that way prior to that documentary. So they all made these massive goals. They all pledged these big things. They all joined these consortiums. And I'm not saying there wasn't good work that was done. There definitely was progress made. But again, I think to Hattie's point on DEI and Katie's, like it was kind of jumping on a little bit of that bandwagon because it was a zeitgeist at the time. But the real intention behind it wasn't quite where it needed to be.
I think this
oops,
is, oh,
sorry.
sorry. Ooh, I knew we were going to do this. Sorry. I was just going to quickly say, I think this is, we touched on this yesterday, and Sandra, I saw your comment in the
Yes,
chat.
I
I
was
do completely agree. Like, I think there is actually, we have research somewhere, was it from one of your reports, Emma, where Emma pulled this incredible research together where it was talking about how people don't fit or feel that they identify with the box that they're put into based on age-based demographics. I completely agree. And we talk a lot about this in our Gen Z Reintroduced report of like this kind of like different factions within that are all true at different times. But I think this is, so in a section in our Gen Z report, we speak about how with that kind of like pulling back of DEI, like flip-flopping between like, oh, we're now with a plus size, now with a thin is in, like this kind of like, we all as consumers, everyone on this call is a consumer, and we all have memories and we remember what brands do and when they decide to dip in and when they decide to dip out. And more brands are being held to account for not stepping up when they said that they would. And yes, from the Creative and Flattening white paper. And particularly with a big part of Gen Z, they have less brand loyalty than they did before. And that's because they're holding people or holding brands to account for what they stand behind. So if you one season do something for like Pride or something for Curve or what, like, and then the next you take it away and pretend it didn't happen, they will remember. So I think that is the authenticity that consumers demand rather than it's like a nice to have. Yeah, sorry, Nicole. That was way longer than I intended.
No, and now it seems a little bit off topic, but going back to where we were before. No, I just think with kids, we definitely are seeing more of the thing with like adaptable, inclusive. Like it was something that seemed, like sustainability and plus size, like trendy, but it's really not. It's about making kids that are clothes for kids, that it's comfortable and that all kids can dress themselves and have this kind of independence and confidence. So it's like Velcros benefit all children and all parents that are trying to dress their kids. It's just great universal design that looks good, feels good, makes kids feel like they, have the independence and the confidence to dress themselves and also look like their peers. Like we just really want to design things that don't single out any individual because, as we know, we all just want to fit in.
And go ahead, Emma.
So I'm just going to piggyback off that, Nicole. It's something I'm actually working on for a sustainability report around kind of kitchen table values. And I think it kind of aligns in the sense that brands that have authentically embedded sustainability at their real core are actually shifting their comms away from like it's all about sustainability, it's all about environmental protection, if you buy this you're going to feel good about yourself, so on and so forth. And they're kind of leaving that it's no longer basically the main character of their communications, and they're shifting what they're saying to be like, well, this is actually better for you as an individual, this is going to help you for this in this way or this way in your life, your actual day-to-day life. And basically realizing that sustainability on its own doesn't really sell. Like we all have needs that ultimately we want to be met when we're parting with money to buy a product. We don't just want to buy something and be like, oh, okay, that did something in a faraway country or in a very distant land, that I can't really connect to myself. But if we can shift that narrative, and we're starting to see it come through, and I don't know if I'm verbalizing this very well, but by embedding sustainability, but then leading with the performance benefits or the benefits for our health or whatever it might be that really connects it to us as humans, that's what we're seeing shift within the sustainability space. And I think it's really like already well embedded in the kids space. And we're starting to see it more kind of across fashion and home in general. And Everlane actually did a new campaign all around the concept of clean luxury. It came out a few weeks ago or months ago. And for a brand that has always been about transparency and sustainability and environmental stewardship and so on and so forth, this latest one is really shifting that narrative to we're actually healthier for you to wear. If you buy our clothing, you will be healthier. In a roundabout way, you will probably live longer. Not that they say that in their actual comms, but like there's a shift in their kind of communication style, and that's massive for a brand that has always been about sustainability. And I think it's going down that route to more align with who we all are as individuals. Sorry. Okay.
No, I think it's such a great point. I think it also is a good shift in this conversation around authenticity when it comes to design. So obviously culture, there's so much happening right now, but when it comes, like, what does it mean to design authentically? And I also, just as an aside, I love what Jody said in the chat where she's like, are companies that keep their DEI initiatives considered more authentic? Like, I think that that's also a question of like, if companies, a lot of companies did these DEI or sustainability initiatives because they felt they had to by the pressures, and then they rolled back. In a way, you could say that they were showing their true authentic colors, which is not very super great. But also, what does it mean to be a business? Like, what does authenticity mean to be as a business? And then also, I think there's interesting conversations around what does it mean to design authentically? And also, as an individual designer who has, you know, if you're designing for a big brand or a big retailer, what does it mean to design from your point of view? So I think that there's a lot of different areas of authenticity that are worth unpacking in this regard. I'm looking at the time, and I know we were trying to test again for everyone who's on the call right now. We wanted to use this show and tell as a little bit of an experiment to see if we could kind of focus these down to 30 minutes. I think realistically, probably with the intros, I think 45 might be more realistic for us. I know we could definitely be going on and on with this conversation and go into all these different pathways. But I think the main thing is that this is essentially this topic of authenticity is something we're going to be unpacking for the upcoming season. So you're going to be seeing it in the cultural sentiments. We're going to be looking at it from our design aesthetics, which look at kind of the design shifts that Hallie holds through the season. So I think there's a lot more for us to explore. So if you are clients, definitely expect to see more of this topic in the coming months for the fall winter 27-28 season. And so I think because of that and because of time, I do want to round us out. But before we officially wrap up, I wanted to do one final poll. This one's a bit more forward-looking, but we're kind of curious to know how everyone in the audience, your perspective may have shifted or evolved based on today's conversation. So, Kara, thank you. We're going to have our second poll. We'll give everyone just a quick minute to answer, and then we will wrap up.
I'm loving this comment section. I love how the chat's
So
like,
good.
I've just been reading through everything. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yes, thank you everyone for participating in the chat, for joining the conversation, for filling out the polls. As we said, we're going to be sharing the data from the two polls with everyone after this. So along with the links and the recording of today's webinar, I want to thank all of my colleagues so much for this amazing, rich conversation and being a part of this new format. As we said, this is kind of an experiment. We're trying to bring show and tell back to its roots. So less presentation, more dialogue. So everyone in the chat who's joined us today, your presence, your comments, all of that is what makes this as rich as it possibly can be. And I think there's more to come as we kind of unpack different things that are happening. We also encourage you to reach out at hello@fashionsnoops.com if there's a topic maybe that you're interested in us looking into. We'd love to unpack that and also maybe invite some of you to join us in the future. So again, with that, I want to thank you all so much for spending part of your day with us. We'll see you next month for another edition of Show and Tell, and hope you all have a great rest of your day and a good rest of your week. Thank you so much.